Hello everyone, my greetings to one and all. This is the second session on indifference curve analysis. In the first session, you have understood some of the basic concepts that one must know to understand the indifference curve analysis. I am Poonam Vohra from Microeconomics Learning Center. This session focuses on the concept of budget line. So let's understand budget line through a tabular as well as its diagrammatic presentation. Let's begin. Let's understand the concept of budget line with the help of a numerical example. Suppose income of the consumer is Rupees 5,000. He needs to buy two goods X and Y, where price of X is rupees 10 per unit, price of Y is rupees 100 per unit. It is further assumed that the consumer spends the entire income on these two goods. By doing so, the consumer is faced with various combinations of the two goods that he can buy. Let's analyze. The consumer may buy only one good or combination of both goods. If the consumer decides to spend whole of his income on the consumption of good Y only, then quantity of good Y consumed would be income divided by price of Y, which is 5,000 divided by 100. That would be 50 units. In that case, nothing is spent on X, so consumption of X would be 0. If the consumer decides to spend whole of his income for the consumption of good X only, then quantity of good X consumed would be income divided by price of X, which is rupees 10 per unit. That is, the consumer can have 500 units of good X, combination F. Since nothing is spent on Y, consumption of Y would be 0. If the consumer decides to spend whole of his income for the consumption of both goods, then there are different combinations. Combination B would mean that the consumer is willing to have additional 100 units of X. To buy additional 100 units of X, he has to sacrifice some units of Y because income is limited. In that case, he needs to spend 1,000 on X. So he is left with rupees 4,000 and hence he can buy only 40 units of good Y, implying sacrifice of 10 units of Y to get 100 units of good X. One can notice that each time the consumer has to sacrifice 10 units of good Y to get each time additional 100 units of good X. So accordingly, amount spent also keeps changing. Now this information on purchase of good X and good Y can be shown diagrammatically by plotting these points. For that, good X is taken on X-axis, good Y is taken on Y-axis. And by plotting these points, that is 0 of X, 50 of Y, 100 of X, 40 of Y, 200 of X, 30 of Y, 300 of X, 20 of Y, 400 of X, 10 of Y, 500 of X, and 0 of Y can be plotted, and one gets combine points A, B, C, D, E and F. By joining all these points, one gets a downward sloping budget line, which exhibits that the expenditure on X plus expenditure on Y is equal to M, that is income. That it implies whole of the income is spent on the purchase of various combinations of these two goods. There may be a situation when the consumer does not spend the entire income on two goods. Such a situation is exhibited by point J, which shows that the consumer buys OM of X and OT of Y, whereas he could have purchased OL of X and OV of Y. It shows that any point below the budget line is attainable and exhibit savings. All the combinations on the budget line cost the consumer exactly his income. So all the combinations in the budget set cost the consumer either exactly his income or less than his income. So all these combinations, whether on the budget line or below the budget line, are attainable and comprise of budget set. There may be a possibility that a point is beyond the budget line as point H. This is unattainable as expenditure incurred on this combination is much more than the income of the consumer. So it is unattainable. One can also observe that slope of the budget line is delta Y by delta X, or the ratio of price of both the goods. So budget line is also called as price line, which is downward sloping. Now assess yourself and identify whether the following statement is true or false. A budget set is the collection of all bundles of goods that the consumer wants to buy. Please check your answer. It's a false statement. A budget set is a combination of two goods on which the actual expenditure is equal to or less than the given income of the consumer. Let's concentrate on the fact that consumer's budget is the price ratio. Diagrammatically speaking, budget line is same as price line. Consumer's budget is the collection of the combination of two goods which costs the consumer exactly his income. That is, expenditure incurred on good X and expenditure incurred on good Y is same as his income. It is also explained in terms of market rate of exchange. That is, the rate at which market requires sacrifice of one good to obtain extra units of the other good. So, market rate of exchange is the slope. That is, quantity of good sacrificed, which is Y, divided by quantity of the good obtained, which is X. So it is delta Y by delta X. As per the numerical example, 10 units of good Y are sacrificed to get 100 units of good X in each case. Or it can be written as 1Y is to 10X in each case. So market rate of exchange would be that 10 units of good Y are sacrificed to obtain 100 units of X, which is 0.1, as it is written as quantity of good Y sacrificed divided by quantity of good X obtained. And by taking into account market rate of exchange as price ratio, that is, price of good X obtained, Px, divided by price of good Y sacrificed. So it is 10x divided by 100y, 0.1, which gives the slope of budget line as market rate of exchange is 0.1. Now there is a negative sign which indicates that if expenditure on one of the two goods is increased, the expenditure on the other has to be reduced so that the total expenditure remains within the limits of consumers' money income. It is a straight line simply because prices of two goods and income of the consumer remains same. Now have a look at this question and identify the correct answer out of the four options given for a statement. The statement is, slope of the budget line is given by A, minus P1 by P2, B, minus P2 by P1, C, P1 by P2, and D, P2 by P1, where P1 is price of one good and P2 is the price of the second good. Please check your answer. The correct answer is option A. Slope of the budget line is given by minus P1 by P2. Minus sign is relevant because it shows that in order to buy one commodity, the quantity of another quantity has to be reduced. So budget line is the price ratio of two goods. I hope you have understood the concept of budget line, its numerical as well as diagrammatic presentation. With this, the session comes to an end. The next session focuses on shifts in budget line. Till then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep practicing.